Good morning, and welcome to the kickoff of Celebrate Babies Week, a week to acknowledge the critical importance of the early years from birth to age 3, and to acknowledge the strategies, what we can do to ensure the healthy growth and development of our youngest children. This webinar is part of ACNJ's Think Babies initiative to ensure that we unlock the potential of every young child born in New Jersey. It is presented in partnership with many of our coalition members. Let me acknowledge them today. The Montclair State Center for Autism and Early Childhood Mental Health, the New Jersey Association of Mental Health, the Coalition of Infant Toddler Educators, the New Jersey Association for the Education of Young Children, the Statewide Parent Advocacy Initiative, New Jersey Breastfeeding Coalition, and the New Jersey Association of Play Therapy. They are our partners in presenting this webinar, but also in all the work that they do to support young children and their families. We are thrilled to be joined here this morning by Dr. Walter Gilliam, who's the director of the Edward Ziegler Center in Child Development and Social Policy at Yale University. I think you will enjoy Dr. Gilliam's presentation. I'm going to leave it to our partner, Caitlin, to introduce him in a minute. We know that the pandemic has impacted on children and families in so many ways. I don't think we even fully understand the extent of the impact that the last almost 2 years has had on children and families. So much attention, however, has been focused on older children, school-age children, learning loss, not as much on infants and toddlers and the impact that these last almost 2 years have had on our youngest children. We've also not had a conversation about the impact on the workforce, especially the early childhood workforce. That's why we're so excited to have Dr. Gilliam join us today to talk about the impact of pandemic stress on young children, their families, and their caregivers, and more important, to talk about the strategies of how we can address this as we begin as a society to reopen. So let me introduce Caitlin Mulcahy, who is our partner and co-chair of the Infant Mental Health Committee of our Think Babies Coalition. Caitlin is the Associate Director of the Center for Autism and Early Childhood Mental Health at Montclair State University, and also heads the SEFI initiative, which you'll hear more about today, the Social and Emotional Formation Initiative. I'm going to turn it over to Caitlin to introduce Dr. Gilliam and also this exciting webinar. Caitlin?
Thanks, Yale, and thanks to you all for being here today. We know that every day is a day to celebrate babies, but it is exciting to have an actual week that we really take time and are mindful around uplifting the realities of families with our youngest children, the capacities, as we say, the remarkable capacities of infants and young children, and spend some intentional time being sure that we tell this story, maybe not to the people that we talk to most of the day, maybe not to the people that we see even in our working lives, but to everyone else in our lives, people who are around us in our communities, people who are living in our homes with us. Do they know it's Celebrate Babies Week? And let's be sure that we take this intentional opportunity to do that, to lift that up and to share the importance of focusing on our youngest families as a benefit to our entire society. And today we are so pleased and honored to kick off our Celebrate Babies Week 2021 by hearing first from Dr. Walter Gilliam, who I'll introduce in just 1 minute. After Dr. Gilliam shares with us his most recent literature, most recent research, which I'm hoping will be quite compelling to us. I don't think we don't know it from a felt perspective, but it's important to see it objectively and to notice it objectively and plainly and honestly and truthfully. And then that noticing will be broadened in a conversation between Dr. Gilliam and Winifred Smith, who is a director in our state, and I'll introduce her before she speaks as well, about what she has been seeing in her role as a director over the past really almost 2 years, 18 months, 2 years, and even before that. After that, we'll be able to hear from a panel of 2 directors, one in private childcare, one in family childcare, and their infant and early childhood mental health consultants who have been a support to their work over the past number of years. Really to hear what it's like, again, to be working in the field of early care and education, and then also how to take advantage of some of the supports that we do have in our state. So we're really pleased that you're here today. We do hope you're able to stay for the entire webinar. If for some reason you're not, we will be recording. You can see it's being recorded right now. And there will be an opportunity to watch the recording and then also have a dialogue this coming Friday at 1 o'clock. So we'll be able to speak to you more about that coming up as well. So to begin, it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Walter Gilliam. As Seal said, Dr. Gilliam is the Elizabeth Mears and House Jameson Professor of Child Psychiatry and Psychology at the Yale Child Study Center and Director of Yale's Edward Ziegler Center in Child Development and Social Policy. He is past president of Child Care Aware of America, a member of the board of directors for 0 to 3, the Irving Harris Foundation, First Children's Finance, and All Our Kin. He is a research fellow of the National Institute for Early Education Research and former senior advisor to the National Association of the Education of Young Children. Dr. Gilliam is the co-recipient of the prestigious 2008 Grawemeyer Award in Education for the co-authored book, A Vision for Universal Preschool Education. His research and scholarly writing address early childhood care and education, early childhood mental health, school readiness, developmental assessment of young children, and race and gender disparities in early childhood. He is most known for his work on preschool expulsion and suspension, early childhood mental health consultation, and race and gender bias in early childhood settings. His work frequently has been covered in major national and international news outlets, and he actively provides consultation to state and federal decision makers. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Gilliam to our conversation today.
Thank you very much for that incredibly kind and generous introduction. And good morning, friends in New Jersey. Thank you so much for inviting me here today to speak with you. I'm going to start to share my screen now so I can pull up some slides for you to see. I hope everybody can see these now. And if you can't, if somebody can give me an audible to let me know that that you're not able to see them, that would be great. So again, thank you very much for inviting me here to speak with you today and to celebrate babies, because that's what we're here to do. And part of celebrating anything, whether it's babies or anything at all, is to appreciate it in all of its complexities. And part of the complexity of celebrating babies is to realize that in many cases we can do far better than we are doing. But that doesn't mean that we're not doing a lot. And so you're going to hear a message in what I'm going to say that's hopeful, I think, but also one that's grounded in some truths and some that point out ways in which I think that we can do even better and even more for our babies as we celebrate them. So I've been, as you heard in the introduction, I've been studying children being expelled, kicked out of, told never to come back to preschool programs. And I've been doing that for now closing in on 20 years. And as well as, studying, the phenomena of children being expelled from preschool programs, also looking into things like early childhood mental health consultation and other things that might help us to be able to understand this phenomena a little bit better. Even though I'm going to be talking a lot, at least at the beginning of this, about children being expelled from programs, kicked out of programs, please know that this presentation isn't just about this worst case scenario of children being expelled, because for every child that's kicked out of a preschool program, there's probably countless other children that somebody maybe kind of wish they could have kicked out. And I don't say that to cast any disparaging comments on teachers. I used to be a public school teacher myself, and it's a hard gig. And the reality is that in many cases, we just do not provide our early care and educators with the supports that they need to make a different decision. They have to balance the needs of the one child and also the needs of the many children. And when they're having to do that, they need supports. No child care provider, no early educator should be going into this alone. So when you hear this, realize that a lot of the things that we're talking about isn't just about the children that actually lose their placement. It can also be about other children as well too. So when we think about children being expelled from preschool programs or suspended or excluded in other types of ways, such as, please pick your child up early today, and the next day, please pick your child up early today. This causes a lot of harm both in the now, and it can also cause a lot of harm later. In the now, at the very least, it denies children access to education. They don't get to go to the early education program because they're kicked out of the program, or they're not allowed to attend for certain hours or for a certain amount of time. It can also undermine the relationship that a family or a child is developing with school. The relationship that a child is negotiating with school is set in the very first days, in the very first months of their early care and education experiences, when they go to child care programs, when they go to preschool programs. How they experience early care and education then will pretty much set the way in which they experience school, perhaps for the rest of their entire lives. It can also obscure the root causes. When we kick a child out of a preschool program, there's oftentimes other reasons that might be at play here. And if we just expel the child and not look into the reasons why, then oftentimes we can be missing important things that we could be intervening on. And as you'll hear a little bit more about later, it can also further calcify any kind of biases we have about who is worthy of service and who isn't worthy of service. And you'll also hear a little bit as I talk about some of the harm that can be caused later on when this happens. So I've been studying preschool expulsion for a while now, and children are expelled from preschool programs about 3 times the rate of K through 12. But when you're talking about child care programs, then you're talking about 13 times the rate of grades K through 12 combined. And that's an awful lot of kids. Each year we expel over 192,000 children from preschool programs. That's 3 and 4-year-olds and sometimes infants and toddlers. And that's before the pandemic began. You could fill up every single seat in all 4 of the major stadiums in New Jersey, every single seat with an expelled preschooler in any one given year, and you'd still have over 3,000 expelled preschoolers standing in the parking lot without a place to sit. That's how many children we're talking about. So when you think about who it is that's more likely to be expelled, and you also think about, what other types of things you can compare preschool expulsion to, well, one natural comparison might be adult incarceration. You can see on the left-hand side here, the rate at which we expel preschoolers or suspend them per 1,000 children that we enroll. So somewhere around 7 expulsions per 1,000 enrolled. So what is the adult incarceration rate in terms of rate per 1,000 adults? Well, it's kind of about the same as the rate at which we expel children from preschool programs. And what is it that we know about who it is that's more likely to be expelled from a preschool program or incarcerated into prisons or jails? So when we're talking about preschool expulsion, boys are expelled at about 4 times actually the rate of girls. What's the difference in adult incarceration in terms of men versus women? Well, it's a little bit more in terms of men versus women than preschool expulsion is in terms of boys versus girls, but pretty close. What about race? Black children are expelled from preschool programs at about 2 to 3, closing in on 4 times the rate of white children. In terms of adult incarceration, about the same. And so I suppose that doesn't necessarily prove that there's a preschool to prison pipeline. But if there is, it's amazing how consistent the diameter of the pipe is. The exact same children that are expelled from preschool programs grow into the exact same adults that are more likely to be expelled from society in the form of adult incarceration. So other things that we know are this: when a child is expelled from a preschool program or early childhood education, it tends to be associated with developing negative school attitudes later on in life. They're more likely to fail grades, fail in school in general. They're more likely to be expelled or suspended later on in their educational career. About a 10 times increased likelihood of dropping out of high school, and about an 8 times increased likelihood of themselves being incarcerated later on. That's what we know in terms of early expulsions and suspensions and what happens as a result of it. But we also know this, that the children of incarcerated parents are at a 3 times greater risk of being expelled from preschool. Now that's the children of the incarcerated parents. And so not only are children who are expelled from preschool programs more likely to be incarcerated later on, but when they have a child, that child in turn is more likely to be expelled from a preschool program. And so when you think about it, you have a child who might be at risk of being expelled from a preschool program. And if they are, it increases their risk of dropping out of school, increasing their risk of then later adult incarceration. And when they have a child themselves, that child is at greater risk of dropping out of school, and it goes on and on and on. And so in a way, it's really not maybe a pipeline, it's more like a corkscrew. And it just keeps repeating itself until we decide to stop. So other things that we know are this, that any kind of an adverse childhood experience that you can think of confers an added odds ratio risk in terms of preschool expulsion. Children who are exposed to domestic violence are over 10 times as likely to be expelled from a preschool program. Children who are exposed to family mental illness, about 10 times likely to be expelled from a preschool program. Adult substance abuse, you could even think of it this way. One of the side effects of adult opioid abuse is that your preschooler may be expelled from a preschool program. Just about anything that you can think of that's an adverse effect on a child's early life experiences will increase their likelihood of also losing the most protective thing that they might have in their life, which is that early care and education program. We also know this, though, that it's not just about the children. It's also about things like teacher stress and teacher depression. As teacher stress increases, the greater the level of stress the teacher reports in terms of job stress, the greater the likelihood that the teacher is going to report expelling a child that year. And we also know this, that teachers who screen positive for depression expel children at about twice the rate of teachers who screen negative for depression. On top of all of that, we know this. There's an awful lot of stress that's happening right now. Let me tell you some of the data that we have from some studies that we're conducting right now. That these are some preliminary data. These are not even really hot off the press yet because they haven't made it to the press. But we know in some studies that we've been conducting, some of these based on studies of over 57,000 child care providers across the United States, some of these in follow-up studies of about 21,000 child care providers. We know that about 15% of our child care workforce, and this is as of June, about 15% of our child care workforce has tested positive for COVID-19 at least at some point. About 0.5% has been hospitalized for COVID-19. If they've been hospitalized, about 20% is likely to have spent time in the ICU, 15% intubated. Close to 2% of our early care and education workforce has had a family member who has been hospitalized due to COVID-19. And 0.6% of our early care and education workforce has buried a family member due to COVID-19. These are household family members. That's an awful lot of loss that's happened within a relatively short period of time. And in terms of the economic stress, within 3 months of the beginning of the pandemic, 35% of the early care and education workforce was completely unemployed. I'm not talking about not coming into work. I'm not talking about taking some sick days. I'm talking about without a job. They were totally unemployed. And 45% of our early care and education programs across the nation have had to close at least at one point or another due to a COVID outbreak, due to somebody getting COVID-19, either a child or a staff or family members. But it's not just about COVID-19 as a disease stressor or COVID-19 as an economic stressor. There's also a lot of racialized stress in the form of racial aggression that a lot of our early care and educators are also experiencing. 7% of our early care and educators, early care and education professionals have reported being the direct target of racial aggression, either verbal or physical or exclusion. 7% in just the past year, just since the murder of Mr. George Floyd. And 13% report somebody close to them having experienced racial aggression in the form of verbal aggression or physical aggression. 16% witnessing it. That's an awful lot of stress when you add all of that up. That's affecting our early care and educators incredibly. And that's what they're dealing with too during all of this. If you think about it that way, it shouldn't be too surprising, I suppose, when we found that just 2 months into the pandemic, in May and June of 2020, 42% of our early care and education professionals across the nation were screening positive for depression. 42%. Now, baseline pre-pandemic expectations about 10%, but now it's 42%. And now it's down to 35% a year later, but 35% is still a whole lot higher than what the expected level would be, which is be about 10%. We're talking about 4 times the rate of depression. In terms of what the children are experiencing, listen to this. 24% of our early care and education professionals report having at least one child in their care who has been hospitalized over the past 24% report having at least one child in their care who has had a family member who has been hospitalized over the past year. And in terms of like children in their care who might have a family member who has died due to COVID-19, 12% report having at least one child in their care who's had a family member who's died of COVID-19. Several of them actually reporting 5 or more children who have lost a family member due to COVID-19. And it shouldn't be too surprising then as a result that our children are reporting or showing more externalizing or acting out behaviors, more internalizing shy, withdrawing kinds of behaviors, and are even having increased difficulties with sleeping and eating, unexplained pains, increased soiling and wetting, all because of the amount of stress that they're carrying. And so if you think about the recipe for expulsions being child and family stress, along with teacher stress, well, then what we have here is really not additive, it's much more exponential. We're talking about an awful lot of children who are experiencing massive amounts of stress within their own lives, within their families' lives, within their communities, coming into our early care and education programs to meet teachers who in many cases may be on their last nerve. And that's a recipe for challenges unless we're there to be able to provide support to these early care educators because they're dealing with an awful lot. This is something that I saw just recently on a website. This was on a listserv of early care and education professionals. And basically this provider was asking, can you remind me what the procedures are for expelling a child from a preschool program? It's already beginning. And then if you put on top of that bias, then you have a recipe not only for increased difficulties with children, but racially disproportionate difficulties for children. We did a study not too long ago, many of you might have heard about it. It was a study where we had teachers look at a video, and it was a video of children who were interacting at a table. And in the video, they had headphones on, and there was an eye tracker that was able to measure down to a pixel and down to 1,000th of a second on the screen exactly where they were looking. And we told the teachers that the secret to being able to manage challenging behaviors in classrooms is to be able to see when a challenging behavior is about to occur. Anytime that you see a child do something that could lead to a challenging behavior, I want you to hit this button. That's what we told them. But the parts that we didn't tell them was this. None of the children are going to misbehave in any of the videos. And the reason why is because they're essentially all child actors that we've placed at a table. A black boy, black girl, a white boy, and a white girl. And what we were really interested in is this. When I lead you to believe that a child's going to misbehave, where do you expect that behavior to happen? Who do you expect to be the one to misbehave as I track your eye gaze? And so you can see here in a recreation of the video, of the experiment, here's a preschool teacher and here's a different preschool teacher. You can see at the bottom of her screen a black bar. That black bar is the eye tracker. Now here's Maria. She's a research assistant for us. She's seeing the exact same video that the teachers are seeing, except in her video, there's a yellow dot. That yellow dot is where the teacher's looking right at that given moment. And instead of me telling you what it is that we found, I thought it might be fun for you to hear it from Corey Turner of NPR News Education telling you what the findings of the study were.
There's a new study out of the Yale Child Study Center that I had to read a few times just to believe what it was telling me. The researchers recruited about 135 preschool teachers. They had them watch video footage of 4 kids playing. A black boy, a black girl, a white boy, and a white girl. And they told the teachers, their subjects, watch the video, there may be some challenging behaviors. As soon as you see something that could become challenging, hit the enter key on your keypad. Well, here's the trick. There was no challenging behavior. The researchers were using eye scan technology to see which child the teachers were looking at the most. And what they found is that the teachers, both white and black alike, spent the most time watching the black boy, waiting for bad behavior that never came. There's one more really interesting headline in this study, which comes later. The teachers were also given a one-paragraph description to read of a hypothetical child with a stereotypical name who behaves pretty badly in class, pushes, scratches, throws toys. And some of the teachers were also given some biographical information that helped make sense of that behavior. They were told that the child lives with his mother, father has been in and out for years, they're relatively poor, the mother is depressed, works 3 jobs. Researchers wanted to know if knowing this information made the teachers more empathetic to the kid. Well, here's the shock. It did, but only if the teacher and the child were of the same race. If the teacher and the child, a white teacher and a black child, or even a black teacher and a white child, knowing that biographical information, those teachers were less empathetic towards those students. And here's why this matters. Imagine if this is true, if there's this empathy deficit in preschool, well, imagine where else that's true.
It's a lot to take in, isn't it? But the good news is this, that we can still have a happy ending. And here's how we can have a happy ending. We already know what to do. We know how to provide supports to our early care and education professionals in the form of things like early childhood mental health consultation. We had conducted a study, my team and I, in Connecticut back in 2016. This was a statewide random controlled experiment, like incredibly rigorous. And we were studying the effects of early care and education professionals receiving mental health supports directly in their program, not in the form of webinars or things to read, but actual hands-on assistance in their classroom provided by mental health professionals. And what we found was this: in just 3 months, a significant reduction in challenging behaviors among the children who were the ones who prompted the child care provider to request the services. And that was great news, because ultimately what we're doing right now is we're taking children and expelling them from one preschool program to another until eventually they end up in a child guidance clinic. And essentially what we were trying to do here was, let's expel instead the clinicians out of their clinics and put them in preschool programs so that they can try to be preventative and be able to provide some kind of support. We replicated the study in Ohio just recently. And what we found in Ohio was not only was the intervention successful, and the intervention is just providing assistance to teachers. Not only was the intervention successful in terms of reducing the challenging behaviors in the children that prompted the request for the services, but we also randomly selected other peer children who were just bystander children in the classroom. And guess what? Their behaviors improved too. And the reason why was because the intervention was aimed at changing the system, not just trying to quote unquote fix an individual child. We will never have enough mental health support to be able to help every single teacher and child who needs it one at a time. We need to be able to have models like this that can affect entire systems. If we're ever going to have any kind of hope to be able to get ahead of an issue as challenging as this, especially in a time as challenging as this pandemic has been for many children and families. There's a lot of different reasons that I think that we should care about children being expelled from preschool programs, or even just children having a difficult time in preschool programs, and especially our Black children and our Black boys. And this is the reason why I think that we should care about it. When we talk about early care and education programs and why we should be investing in them, oftentimes we cite 3 studies: the Perry Preschool study out of Ypsilanti, Michigan, the Abecedarian study out of Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and the Chicago Child Parent Study. The reason why we cite those is because they have return on investment data attached to them that allow us to be able to say every dollar that's spent on early care and education yields $7.14 in societal savings by the time the children are 27, or $17 by the time they're 45. You've all heard those kind of statistics before. The statistics you might not have heard are this: The most widely cited study to make the case for early care and education in America, the Ypsilanti Preschool study in the 1960s, was a study of 123 children, and every single child in the study was Black. Every single child in the study was Black. The number 2 most widely cited study to make the case for early care and education is the Abecedarian study in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, 98% Black. The number 3 most widely cited study to make the case for why early care and education should exist in America, the Chicago Child Parent Center study, 93% Black. What we've done in this nation is we have taken data that belong to our Black children, Black families, Black communities, and used it to create a program for the benefit of all children. And that's good. But then when no one's paying attention, we disproportionately kick out the back door the children who gave us the data in the first place, the children whose data purchased that program. And we can't continue to do that. When you think about social justice and civil rights, they're often matters of access. It's about getting into something. And that can be access to a seat on a bus, or access to a seat at a deli counter, access to voting, access to higher education, or access to an elementary school. And in this case, we're talking about access to something incredibly important, early childhood education. But access isn't just about getting in the front door. It's also about making sure that you're not shoved out the back door too. And I don't mean shoved out on purpose. I mean shoved out because we're just not providing the supports that our early care and education providers need and deserve to have. I was giving a talk like this not too long ago in Las Vegas, Nevada. And I gave this talk and I sat down, and then a court judge came up and talked about implicit bias in the court systems in terms of foster care placement decisions and things like that. And then when he sat down, it was time for lunch. And then the MC, the person on the right, came up onto the stage, and she brought with her a young girl on the left. And the MC asked her, I didn't see anybody your age. I didn't expect to see anybody your age here at this meeting. This was a My Brother's Keeper initiative meeting in Las Vegas. And she asked, why were you here? And the girl said, well, I came here with my mother. And she said, well, what do you remember hearing that might have stood out to you? And she said, well, I remember when that researcher guy, that professor guy, talked about how teachers look at kids like me. And I knew she was talking about the findings that I had reported. And I'll be very honest with you, I was afraid. And what I was afraid of was I was afraid that I might have said something that might have hurt her, or might have changed the way in which she views school, or views teachers. And then the MC said, well, how did that make you feel? And then this little girl said something I will never, ever, ever forget. She said, well, me and my friends, we already knew it. We just didn't think you all did. That's what she said. And what that taught me is this. It's not just about how we treat individual children in our care. It's also the fact that other children are watching too, and they see what we do. And that's why it's important that we provide all of our early care and education professionals all the support that they need, in terms of anything that they need in order to be able to do their job better, because this is our children that we're talking about. The measure of a society and how much we truly love our babies is how much we care for those who care for those babies. I truly believe that. And so with that, I'm going to say thank you to all of my collaborators. Thank you to our funders. Also, thank you to the many wonderful early educators, parents, and teachers and children who have participated in our studies over the year, but also especially a special thank you to you for each and everything that you do to help make the world a better place for children and families. I thank you, thank you, thank you.
And we thank you, Dr. Gilliam. I don't know about the rest of you, but I feel the need to do a big exhale. I see all of that data building up in my body. Imagine that might be what we're all feeling too, particularly if this might be the first time that you're hearing the data. So maybe just take a big deep breath in and out, because we want to clear space to listen now to one of the people who are the carers of the babies, and caring for the caregivers of babies, which is our director speaking today, Winifred Smith, who is the director of Zadie's of the Oranges, just 3 privately operated and owned childcare centers in North Jersey. And Winifred is going to share a little bit about her work and then respond to some of Dr. Gilliam's data. And I would encourage us, sometimes we can get a bit saturated, particularly if information is overwhelming or really hits our feeling centers. We can sort of do whatever we need to do to potentially move away from the material or maybe shut down slightly. And I really do encourage us, if you're feeling that way, take that big breath again so that you can hear from Winifred, particularly her perspective, her fierce advocacy, her strong voice for the workforce, her understanding of infant and early childhood development and infant and early childhood mental health, emotional health, relational health, and particularly how her understanding of our history of what she'll talk about as original sin in this country of racism and systemic oppression is being shown now, similar to Dr. Gilliam's research, but in a way that same as that little girl said to you, right? Like she knew it. Some of us have known it. She just didn't know whether or not all of us have known that. So Winifred, welcome.
Thank you so much, Caitlin. Good morning, everyone. I am so excited to be on this panel. Thank you, AC&J, for this amazing opportunity. I could listen to Walter's research all day, but I have been tasked to tell stories from the field, stories that are all too familiar to us working in early care and education, but that so desperately need to be told. As a senior director of 3 family-owned and operated childcare centers, 2 of which are in different, totally different environments, and 1 that is publicly funded, I believe I am uniquely positioned to give a firsthand account of operating during a global pandemic and the impact it is having on both the workforce and those we have been entrusted to care for and educate. I can remember my elation when we reopened June 2020. I am not sure how much longer we could have survived with no income coming in. As a result, we worked tirelessly to prepare for an immediate reopening. However, I realized how hard it was for me to deal with COVID, and recognizing I was asking my staff to work on the front lines during a deadly global pandemic with a population known for sharing everything from toys to germs. We used the last hour of that first work week to reflect. With smaller class sizes, shorter hours, and more staff on hand to help manage the new state mandates, remarkably, the staff seemed more at ease. We saw fewer stress-related behaviors in that first wave of students who returned. But this wasn't sustainable because childcare only works if you consistently have full enrollment, revenue to cover expenses, and on-time fee collection. Few, if any of these things happened pre-COVID, and they definitely weren't happening now. Fast forward to September 2020, and I have to admit, I was furious with what was happening in education. Public K-12 teachers were given an option to be in person, virtual, or a combination of both, while still receiving full funding. And us folks in early care and education were expected to just show up and work. I mean, think about it. The educational system with the least of everything, compensation, human infrastructure, training, professional development, medical and retirement benefits, were being asked to single-handedly support the economy. If fear and dated infrastructure prevented K-12 teachers from returning to in-person learning, why was it okay for us? We were facing similar challenges without any safety net. Some of the communities my ladies lived in were ravaged by COVID. A lot of them either lost loved ones from COVID or knew someone who did. The director at one of my sites tried to keep track of all the older staff's unemployment call dates so she could help them input their information into the system on a weekly basis. These ladies were afraid to leave their homes, had refused to take public transportation, and now we were calling them back to work, all of them. This seemed so unfair to me. But it's interesting how our failure to properly address America's original sin continues to haunt us, especially during times of stress. Women, and especially women of color, are often asked to be superhuman and to do more with less. From slavery to today, women of color who disproportionately make up the early care and education workforce have raised America's children. And America continues to miss these pivotal opportunities make the investments needed to protect an industry that has given so much to society and everyone else's child, even if it meant neglecting their own. It amazes me that the industry responsible for setting the foundation for humans' entire life and is a backbone to America's economic infrastructure is so undervalued, underappreciated, and underpaid. Because as you know, humans make the most gains in the first 5 years of life than they will ever make. And yet the person responsible for that foundation has to worry about paying their rent, if they can afford to go to the doctor, how long they must wait for their next food stamps, benefits, all while developing and nurturing the social, emotional, and cognitive skills of their students. It's no wonder teachers are walking off the job, whether in public or private childcare centers. Some of my best teachers are finding it harder and harder to handle the big emotions of their students, while also trying to cope with their own life stressors. I am constantly reminding them that these babies missed opportunities to play on playgrounds, attend classes. So it's going to take them just a little longer for them to get acclimated. But as their teachers, you must remember that you're bigger, stronger, wiser, and kind. Those of us still open may have survived the shutdown, but I'm not sure we will survive the workforce shortage. And if we do, at whose expense? Science tells us the key to quality in early care and education is a workforce. And the world knows that the solution to a robust economy is the childcare industry. It's now time to kind of reimagine how we support early care educators and provide them with the same compensation, benefits, professional development, and training as their K through 12 counterparts. Thank you.
So Winifred, I wonder, when you were hearing Dr. Gilliam's data, did anything strike you particularly that really you see, in your day-to-day, or any questions that you have for him that you wanted to chat with him about?
So I would love Dr. Gilliam's thoughts on workforce shortages. One of the things that has continued to drive me absolutely crazy is when everyone kind of blames the workforce shortage on the stimulus checks, or people just don't want to work anymore. And I have really different thoughts about that, but I would love to hear from Dr. from Walter and see what his thoughts are.
Sure. Well, I'll be honest with you. I'd like to hear what your thoughts are. But since you asked me first, I'll honor that. But I hope you'll tell me too what you think. We did collect some data on this, and we got some data now back from about 70 or so thousand childcare providers across the United States, reporting on difficulties filling slots in terms of children, difficulties filling positions in terms of the staffing, and whether they're experiencing both of those. And quite a few programs are reporting difficulties hiring people, and a lot of programs are also reporting difficulties finding the children. And many programs are reporting both. And here's the reality, I think that's true for our industry, is that it was always incredibly fragile. It was fragile before this pandemic. And like a cake in the oven, it didn't take much to flatten it, but you can't just inflate it back up. You can flatten it pretty quickly, but to get it back up, you're going to have to ratchet it back up. And the reason that we'll have to ratchet it back up is because if you hire more staff, but you don't have enough children, you won't be able to pay that staff. And then if you find the children, but you don't have enough staff, you won't be able to serve the children. And so you'll have to literally ratchet it back up slowly. And it's going to take a lot of resources to be able to do that. The problem here is that we've never paid this workforce what this workforce deserves. Never, ever, ever. Not even at its very best has this workforce ever been paid what it deserves. And I was on a call not too long ago with some people who were talking about this. And they said that, well, one thing that might have happened as a result of the pandemic is that now people realize the importance of childcare and the importance of early education. And I said, well, I think in a way that's true, but not really. I think we've always valued early care and education. We've always valued child care. And the evidence of that is in the Northeast. Anytime there's a snow day, everybody values childcare. You know, you get to rediscover how much you value childcare. I think the difference really here is a little bit different than that. I think it's that when somebody has a commodity that's valued and we respect the person that holds that commodity, we negotiate with them for it. But if somebody has a commodity that we value and we don't respect them, we exploit them. And the reality is this has been an exploited labor force ever since its beginnings. Ever since its beginnings, in many cases in the form of Black nannies who were enslaved, taking care of white children, or imported labor in order to take care of children and do domestic work in homes. This industry has constantly had that baggage of exploitation attached to it. And we've not ever been able to shake it ever since. That's my take on it, but I would love to hear your thoughts about it.
Oh, there we go. Okay. So I agree with you 100%. I also think that there needs to be almost a national reckoning. We lost 700,000 plus people in this pandemic. New Jersey alone lost more than 27,000 people. We know that a lot of the people who we lost were frontline workers, so that we could stay in our homes. I couldn't, but other people could stay in their homes and do other work, right? So knowing that we lost that many people, and that was just a COVID, right? That's the number of people we counted. We don't know how many people we may have lost to just regular stuff or uncounted. We also don't know how many people are experiencing long haul COVID symptoms. And there are also a lot of orphans because we lost so many people. And so how many families have drastically changed because of the pandemic? And I don't know if this data is being captured. And so I think when you combine all of these factors, there are multiple layers into why there's a workforce shortage. But I really get upset when people say, like, it's just because of the stimulus. And I think that is just absolutely wrong. I think there's just so much more. I do believe because we have underpaid this workforce for so long, that's another reason. The work is incredibly challenging. While rewarding, it's hard. So I think that we have to take that into consideration as well. We don't have those protections that our K through 12 counterparts have. So I think that there's a lot, and I'm not sure if it's going to get better anytime soon, because like you said, it's really easy to collapse. It's going to be really hard to rebuild it back up.
Yeah, and you made a point earlier too, when you were talking about how our early care and education professionals were coming to work when it was deemed unsafe for K through 12 teachers to be coming to work. You know, and there's a reality to that too. You know, I mean, they were taking on an awful lot of stress. And the stress that they were taking on in many cases was the stress of taking on a risk that nobody could even quantify for them. You know, they didn't even know how much of a risk they were taking on, but they were taking it on in order for other people to go to work. You know, and you had mentioned how you were one of the ones who were going to work because you were an essential worker to make it possible for others to not have to go into work. And I will freely admit, I am one of those others who did not have to go into work. You know, your work and what you did made it possible for me and others like me to be protected. And for that, I want to thank you. You know, and the reality is that many people were protected during this pandemic because of essential workers, including our early care and education professionals, who are making it possible for people like me to be able to do their job mostly at home on Zoom. You know, and they were not only taking care of children in order for people to be able to do other work, but they were stocking shelves and they were making deliveries and they were taking on a risk. And what we also know from the data that we collected is this: our child care providers, not only were they coming into work, but if they had a significant other in their home, chances are pretty good that was an essential worker too. And so the amount of risk that they were taking on was just absolutely incredible. And for us to not acknowledge that and to not pay that back in some kind of a way, I think would just be criminal.
I agree with you. Thank you for saying that. I think you also, there was a point where we've spoken in the past where you talked about, equal versus equitable? Like, as we start to think about like how we distributed COVID, relief, it may have been equal, but was it truly equitable? Can you like expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, that was in a conversation that you and I had. The burden of COVID-19 certainly was not equally distributed. Some people carried a lot more burden than other people did, and they carried a lot more risk. And as a result, they've carried a lot more loss. Some of us have carried a lot more loss than others. But then when it's time for the relief to come, we tend to distribute the relief equally, not equitably, not in terms of providing more relief to those who suffered the most, more relief to those who carry the heavier burden. And that's really, truly what we should be doing. We should be providing more relief to those who carry the heavier burden through this. And many of those people are indeed our early care and education providers. They carried an awful lot. They are the unsung heroes of this pandemic. It was, if you went to the hospital, or if somebody you love went to the hospital, and that person that you love or you yourself was taken care of during this COVID-19 pandemic, maybe you had COVID-19, somebody you loved had COVID-19, and they were taken care of. There was a child care provider there somewhere that was probably taking care of the children of that pulmonologist and that nurse and that receptionist and that custodial worker who was working in that hospital that made that care possible. They are the workforce that makes all other workforces possible. And I just don't think that we acknowledge that enough.
So there's a question that will likely need a little bit of time to think through and answer. So let me pose it to you, and then either one of you might share your thoughts to it. The question says, Black children and families are studied to justify investment in early childhood education. But generally speaking, white men hold the power to improve the system. In the current polarized political climate, are there other ways to convince the unconvinced?
You want to take that, my friend?
So I think that, again, I don't think that they aren't convinced. I think that everyone recognizes how important early care and education is. The question is, how do we convince them to value the people who are making it possible? And I think that, that kind of goes back to that reckoning that we may end up needing to have about slavery and our original sin and the things that have been modeled from generation to generation. None of us on this call were, back there in 1619, and we're responsible for that, but it doesn't change the fact that what our grandparents saw and our grandparents' grandparents saw was what will be replicated over and over again in our lifetime until we have a serious and kind of what I call come to Jesus moment about slavery.
Well, I'd add something to that, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Maybe I'm being too radical, but if it's difficult to convince the existing power structures, then maybe it's time to change power structures and diversify those power structures more. More women in positions of decision making, more people of color in positions of decision making, more women of color in positions of decision making. And once we get more people around the table, and I don't care if it means having to build a bigger table, as long as we can get more people around the table, then it increases our likelihood of having somebody at that table who actually understands the things that we're talking about. We need people who have had to crawl their way up and remember that they did, and leave the ladder behind for others too. That's the kind of people that we need to have at decision-making tables. I have a friend named Matthew Melmet. He's the executive director at 0 to 3. And he had this one quote that I just absolutely love. He said, that when it comes time for decision makers and politicians to be kissing babies, he just wants to say some of the times, I don't want to see anybody kissing any babies unless you mean it. And that's part of it too, is literally holding people's feet to the fire. If you're going to say that you care about babies and you're going to kiss some babies on a campaign trail, make me some promises right now when you need the vote, and then let me see whether you do it later. And when you don't, I'm going to call you out on it. And if not, then maybe we need to even more diversify that leadership. You know, maybe I'm too radical on this, but I'm tired of moral victories on behalf of children. I just don't want to hear any more people telling me about how great children are and how wonderful children are, and doing something that looks completely the opposite of that when they're in power.
I agree. I think that's what Caitlin would call a both and. Right.
Right. That's right. So, you know, we talk about both and because in the term that was in the question, the polarized, oftentimes polarization is meant for us not to be able to move forward. It's intentional. You know, that's something that is put into place so that change does not happen. And so to recognize that we all have the ability for both and. There is that possibility to say, you know, we think this and we think that, or we have people at the table and we are going to welcome additional people to this table. That the false narrative of making us stay in places that means we're just going to be politically arguing and never actually making change is purposeful. And so talking about revolution, it's don't go, that's not the argument we're in. We're not doing that. We're not doing that. We are moving forward and we have the ability for both and in this case, you know, something I think about a lot is whether or not the murder of George Floyd would have had as much impact if not during a global pandemic. And most of me, like Winifred just said, says no. But that's what happened. And so we cannot detangle these two realities. We can't detangle the fact that the healthcare crisis was a universal healthcare crisis and disproportionately affecting the same people who are disproportionately affected by social policies that have continued the structure of oppression that has started in 1619. And it's here for us, and we have that opportunity to change it now.
The murder of George Floyd also wouldn't have had the impact that it's had right now if it weren't for a 17-year-old Black girl named Darnella Frazier.
That's right. Yes.
Had the forethought and the courage to pull out a cell phone and record the whole darn thing right there and put it in front of everybody's face so that they could not close their eyes.
Could not close their eyes. Yes. Yes. And, you know, a quote that many of us say in our state, Walter, which you might have heard Jerry say before, Jerry Costa, who is a mentor to many of us, says for himself that his teacher in infant mental health, Michael Trout, would say to him that Selma Fragberg opened our eyes and we cannot close them again. And so much of this conversation, to me, so much about Celebrate Babies, so much about the awareness of what happens in early family development and those who care for young families. It is about open your eyes so you cannot close them again. And anytime you feel like that's a possibility, like you feel like I really want to do that, I just want to turn around, or I just want to bury my face in a pillow or whatever it might be, feel that for a second and push through. Keep going, because that opened eyes piece, you can't close them again. And both of you really allowed us that today. I want to share that I don't find it to be something we get to see all that often, which is a dialogue about information and about experience. And for it to happen so naturally between the two of you has been really interesting for me to see. And I imagine, and I'm watching the chat and it seems like interesting for those here to see. So I want to thank you both for your thoughts today, for your willingness, your courage to engage in dialogue that was not scripted, not planned, that will allow for turns and openings and new ways of thinking about things. So thank you to you both.
Thank you for the opportunity.
And thank you, Winifred, for the incredibly inspiring and touching words that you had earlier. And thank you for all that you do. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah. So we'll have an opportunity now to hear from two additional directors and then the infant and early childhood mental health consultants that they were able to partner with as part of their work over the past 18, 20, 24 months. You heard Dr. Gilliam talk about the service of infant and early childhood mental health consultation, which, as he said, is really a service that's meant to be directed towards the adults who care for children. Sometimes very, very small amount of time, it's to support a child or a family, but on the whole, it's to support and care for those who care for our youngest children and families. And so today, as a way of explaining or illuminating what that looks like and how that might be experienced, we're going to hear from Stephanie Wallenford, who is the director and owner of Holding Hands Family Childcare and Learning Center in Mullica Hill, which is in Gloucester County. She's been in that role for 20 years. And Erica Sanchez, who is a family childcare provider for Mikasa in Linden, New Jersey. And alongside them, you'll be able to hear from Jean Budd, who's the Assistant Director for Infant and Early Childhood Mental Health Consultation at the Center for Autism and Early Childhood Mental Health at Montclair State University. And Dr. Gloria Andrade, who is Lead Infant and Early Childhood Consultation Specialist also at our center. Jean has been the what we say SEFI support consultant for Stephanie, and Gloria has been the SEFI support consultant for Erica. So I invite all four to join us. And Stephanie, I'll ask you to start us off sharing this panel. Just let us know what it is that you would like to share around your experience over this pandemic, and even before, because you accessed SEFI support before the pandemic, and just your experience with SEFI support with infant and early childhood mental health consultation as a way of explaining to those who might not know of the service or might not know what it looks like or how to get it or what happens. Could you tell us a little bit about that story?
Absolutely. Thank you, Caitlin. And thank you for the invitation. I'm very excited to be here. I am the owner director of a childcare center in Gloucester County, as Caitlin said. We have family in our name, but we, just to clarify, are not a family childcare. We enroll over 100 children with over 30 staff members, and we have been operating for 20 years. We have family in our name because we started this as a family, my mother, my sister, and I can remember sitting at kitchen tables, dreaming of the ideas, and one of our core values was being committed to helping children that didn't work out in other centers. And even in the beginning, when we started, some of the staff we hired who had worked in other centers, and when they got their class list, they said, oh, that child was at another center. And we felt very strongly that we wanted to provide an environment where they would have a second chance. And that was the vision from the moment we opened the door. Alas, the time came and we very quickly realized that we did not have the knowledge and the resources to support all the children. We worked really hard. We fumbled lots of times for about 17 years. Had some successes, had a couple times where we just couldn't meet the need. But I think most of all, we just patched it together for many years until the children could move on to the public school system where there were more resources. And I think now, hearing everybody, I think about all the times and how much we supported the staff during the time. It was always our vision to do that, but without those resources, we could not provide as much support. And then 3 years ago, we joined Grow New Jersey Kids, and our TAS suggested, after seeing some challenges, SEFI. And we started working with Jean Budd. I think we had one visit before in person. I think I met her once or twice in person before we went all virtual. And she, in the last 18 months, has provided virtual support in two different classroom environments. And when I look back, I thought this is really interesting because they were two very different situations. The first was a very classroom-based situation. We certainly were seeing some displays and challenging behavior in a couple children, but coming back and looking at the macro picture, which is what having an outside person helped a lot, we were able to see other areas for strengthening. And that's really what she did. She came alongside two staff members who, quite honestly, I thought were going to leave because they were so stressed out. And these are talented, dedicated, caring staff members that I really thought I was going to lose. But she came alongside them and they bought in and embraced it. And honestly, I talk about them as our poster child, and I say it can work, and come talk to them. And they made such a difference. And I was thinking about what Dr. Gilliam was saying, because it wasn't just a difference in the experience of the two children that were having difficulty, it was a difference in the experience of all the children in the classroom, and a difference in the experience of these two staff members. And then this year we called her again, reached out again with a child that we were experiencing some challenge with. And we had tried some resources and some interventions here and did not have success. So we reached out again, and Jean and her colleague, Jonelle, came in and worked with the staff member over a period of about 6 to 9 months. Unfortunately, this situation did not end up with as an immediate positive outcome as the last one. I still have hope that the future will bring that. What was different for me in this experience, in which we were not able to serve all this child's needs, is that we really set the child up we set the family up, because this particular situation, she worked not only with the staff, but she also worked with the parents. But we set the parents up with very tangible next steps and very tangible resource people to reach out to. And I felt very encouraged, because in many decades past, it didn't have to be the kind of situation where we just threw our hands up and said, we don't have any more answers. I felt like we had resources, and I feel like the door is open, that if the child gets support, that the child can come back. These have been positive. Positive isn't even a big enough word to explain how the experiences have been, and to know that when we get to a point where we hit the end of our knowledge, we have somebody to reach out to is such a relief. And it's such a relief for our staff, and they need this resources, and they need more of it, and the families need more of it. It truly is challenging. If you have a child who is 5 or 6 years old in kindergarten, there are so many more resources in this state. But if you have a 0 to 5, it is a struggle. A lot of therapists won't see you. There just aren't as many options. So to have SEFI has been just an important addition. And for me personally, I finally feel like we are able to get back to and uphold that original core value of being able to support children that may not fit into that typical mold, and a typical system may not work for them.
Thank you, Stephanie. So we're going to hear from Erica, and then we'll hear some response from Jean and Gloria. So Erica, can you tell us about your experience with SEFI support, your experience at your center, and how the past 18, 20, 24 months has gone for you?
Thank you for having me. Good morning, everybody. My name is Erica. I'm a family child care provider for Union County. For me, I'm so thankful for SEFI to the service that they have me provide for my job. As so many of you know, our job is very insulated. We have working with children for maybe 50 hours, so we don't have that contact with other adults like a regular job, and we don't have that time to maybe talk to anybody about our job. And it's different, you know, having friends that work in different fields, but having somebody that can really relate with our jobs. For me, it's a blessing for me, for my program. Having SEFI by my side working during this year, it's like I don't have enough words to say how they are helping me. Because sometimes you don't know if you're doing a good job. Sometimes you don't know if you're doing good or you're doing bad. But having them and working with me, having those sessions just to let me talk about my job, let me talk about how I'm feeling about my job. You know, as a family childcare provider, as a person, as a mother, as a wife, as a daughter, it's good to have that opportunity to express ourselves, and also to have that opportunity to let other people know about these sessions, you know, because we're caring for kids. We're not caring. It's not an easy job. If you are not feeling capable to do your job well, how are you going to treat your kids? You know, for me, putting myself first, it's what has me doing a good job for my children, for the children that I care. I know that every family have a different situation. I know that every child is a different world. So for that reason, you have to be able to provide a good service, to be able to feel good. That's how I feel. And I thank Grow and Jay. I thank my TA to do me for this referral for SEFI. I didn't know about that program. So I invite, you know, all the people, all the providers, and all the persons that work in this field with children to, you know, to get that care for themselves. It's very important to work in our mental health, to be able to provide a good service for our children. Thank you.
Thank you, Erica. I was thinking to myself as you were talking, I was like trying to write down all the things you were saying, because they're all like the exact things that we would want to put on all of our, you know, shouting from every billboard everywhere, especially that, you know, you have to be well to care well. That alone is so critical. So let's hear Jean and Gloria. After you've been listening to your partners, what did you hear? What did you notice? Is there anything that you wanted to share with us about your partnership as the infant and early childhood mental health consultant to these two programs?
And Gloria, would you like to go first, or would you like me to lead? Thank you. So there is much that Stephanie glossed over. First of all, our team, SEFI, are not the experts that come into a center, fix the child, put things in place, and then leave. However, the first step is for the SEFI specialist to build a relationship with the director. And that looks very different and unique to a center. So I must say, Stephanie, you kept to your vision. You made sure that I fit the bill in providing quality and trust and the ability to be with and see your staff before you openly invited me to partner. And when that occurred, as you said, you were alongside me and your staff every step of the way. So in our work, we talk about something that's called parallel process. Stephanie was able to share her desires, her understanding of her staff and the families, and protect them, sharing that with me so that I could then partner with her in supporting the staff. There's something else, and I don't often get to the end outcome first. However, Stephanie felt so empowered by being able to watch the elevation of skills in individual classroom teams, that for each of, there's actually 4 SEFI requests, Stephanie dedicated professional development time so that all of her staff could benefit from the themes. So just briefly, the themes were all unique in every 4 of the opportunities over the last 2 years that I have felt part of the Holding Hands family. Initially, in a 3-year-old classroom, there were a few children that what I call the me, mine, I have to be first syndrome. And so being with the staff, considering what would it be like if we saw these children with soft eyes? Is it a strength rather than a disruption? So that's called reframing the behavior. Shortly thereafter, at a staff meeting, Stephanie invited the teachers along with me to share reframing behavior and also integrate many pyramid skills. Another opportunity when the stress level was very high for the lead teacher who wanted to take care of meeting the needs of all the 15 or so children within her care, we were able to think about. And so all of this is based also in the core concepts of reflection. Being able to wonder with Stephanie. Stephanie always made sure there was coverage and time where the teachers could be with the 2 of us and then individually to think about their work. So active supervision, teaming in that classroom, and it was so beautifully embraced that Stephanie identified that particular teacher as a mentor teacher visiting other classrooms to model, since I have been virtual. So that teacher was able to take the SEFI work and share it with her other colleagues. And so Stephanie mentioned, you know, considering what's happening in the classroom isn't just where things ended, but looking at how social skills are supported. And then most recently, working with a family, identifying therapeutic needs that will support them and how they have the bridge in support with the center. And I agree, Stephanie, looking forward to having that child feel emotional safety and protected in your care. So
Thanks, Jean.
thank you.
You know, I know the work that you're discussing, but just to frame it, it sounds to me like there are really 4 ways that infant and early childhood mental health consultation can support a program. There can be support for directors. There can be full program support, which is something that we're seeing a lot because obviously, as we've heard, the workforce is has been holding us all up, holding up the society, and could use a little help with that support. There's also the classroom, directly providing some support to the classroom teachers, to the assistants in the classroom. And then there's some children and families who might need direct support for them. And I know at Holding Hands, there's been all levels having happened there through SEFI. Gloria, for your work with Erica, what would you like to share? What kind of things did you do together? Any insights or reflections?
Thank you. Thank you very much. And yes, I'm going to be talking about Erica, and I want to compliment her because I know before she got into the screen, she was so nervous, but you did such a beautiful job, Erica, explaining to us your experience. And in just a brief explanation, you gave us so much content about what is that we do together. And I want to take this opportunity to thank all the family care providers for giving us the opportunity to grow together, because this is what we're doing. When we go and we provide those services, yes, you probably learn something from us, but we are always learning from you. And I want to compliment all of my family care providers that are on the screen, because I keep seeing on the chat, hi, hi, hi. So we know Erica is not the only one family care provider here. But the kind of work that we do with Erica basically reflects some of the statistics and some of the things that we have seen through all this pandemic. And we are very excited that this is taking us where we are right now, that we know that they exist in the map, that these family care providers are there and they've been at the front, and they are helping all of us to go ahead. And one of the things that we do is we work so individual, because each one of the centers has their own culture, their own personality, their own needs. So when we go and we sit with you, when we talk to you, we really are creating intentionally all these kind of conversations that are with the intention to support them, as Caitlin says, in all different aspects. So we are very excited to have that opportunity. We are very excited to be now part of the discussion and part of this paradigm shift that we are seeing at different levels, but hopefully that is going to keep bringing all of up. So we really see that parallel process start coming from the top to down to all of us here. With Erica, we had a chance to do a lot of work based on the referral of a child that she had so many concerns. And one of the things that we know now is that these family care providers aren't experts, but they don't believe in themselves. And we are trying to build that they know and they are professionals and they are struggling bringing this to the communities and showing to the communities that they know their staff. And when they see things, it's because there is really something there. Have an opportunity to listen to her concerns and validate most of her concerns and work with resources and trying to reach to the families and trying to support her on her relationship with the family and going to the struggles that the pandemic was putting in front of her was a wonderful process for her. And seeing her growing as a professional and as a person, it's one of the biggest rewards that we had an opportunity to see when we do this type of consultation. So I don't have more than encourage everybody to give us that opportunity and to let us be part of all your journey, because we are just eager to keep learning. Thank you.
Thanks, Gloria. So SEFI is the Socio-Emotional Formation Initiative. That's what SEFI. Stephanie, it's funny, we used to joke about selfies, like, because it's close, but SEFI is the Socio-Emotional Formation Initiative, and it is the state's infant and early childhood mental health consultation program. As you've heard, it has been happening in early care and education settings, both private child care center-based as well as family child care across the state, whether or not a program is enrolled in Grow NJ Kids. SEFI is funded by the Department of Human Services Division of Family Development, which is, as you know, also funding our quality rating and improvement system, which is known as Grow NJ Kids. But SEFI as a quality partner is able to support all programs, whether enrolled in Grow or not, whether center-based or family childcare. No one needs to be rated. It is a service that's available. And in the minute, the Burke Foundation is funding an evaluation of the infant and early childhood mental health consultation program that will help us know if it's effective, and it will also help us be able to share how it has impacted our state and our providers. Support is, to me, the the image I always see is again, the workforce holding up our society, as we heard from Dr. Gilliam and Winifred earlier, and SEFI coming on and adding some hands to that process. So that's support to us. That's what we're saying, is that we're alongside all of you as you do the really revolutionary, societally changing work, the neuroarchitecture work of caring for our youngest children and families. This week, as we celebrate babies, we also celebrate all of you. So Stephanie and Erica and everyone who does work very similar to you, we are here to also celebrate you. The hashtag is not just Celebrate Babies 2021, but also caregivers are still essential. And what we're working on this week is the sustaining the role of that essential caregiver. So we thank all four of you for sharing your experiences today. I do encourage all of us to, again, find the Celebrate Babies information and share it to someone who doesn't work in this field. You know, that's where our advocacy goes. That's where our awareness goes. We really can make change, similar to what we were talking about earlier, if we share this information about the importance of the workforce caring for our youngest families to people who are not doing that. So other people, so you have a task, your task for this week is to tell someone else about either this webinar, something you learn on social media posts from one of the partners, maybe something you heard today. Tell someone else who does not work with infants and young children. You have a task for just one. Be great if you did a whole hand, but just one is okay. So I'll bring back Seal to close us out today, but to this panel and to Winifred and Dr. Gilliam, thank you for your voices today, and hello, Seal.
Thank you, Caitlin. And let me extend thanks first to our incredible partners for helping to host this forum, especially to the ACNJ staff, Hannah Kornheilner, who pulled this all together, and Catherine Filegi, our incredible technical person who makes this all happen. Great thanks to Dr. Gilliam. As usual, you are so inspiring. For me, it is an energizing experience. Caitlin, a wonderful partner and very exciting to hear the work at SEFI. And Winifred, I have to say, you've made me a better advocate. I've learned so much from you over the last year and a half. You are an incredible advocate, and thank you. You've enriched all of us. And as Caitlin said, to all of you who do this work every day, I've been monitoring the chat, seeing your comments, and all I can think about is how do we harness the information we heard today and your knowledge, energy, and passion. And I'm going to echo what Caitlin said. This is the time to get other people in this room. In many ways, we're all in agreement. We're preaching to the converted, but we have to get other people who don't know these issues in the room, particularly state leaders, policymakers. As one of you said in the chat, those of you who control the budget and hold the purse strings of our state. The irony is that for the first time, we have some money. Because of the federal ARPA funds and the Build Back Better pending in Washington, we have the opportunity, we have funding for the first time that we could use, but we have the responsibility to make sure that we use it well and invest it in our youngest children. I'm going to echo what Caitlin said. Your knowledge and experience to me create a responsibility to advocate. So I'm going to ask you, as Caitlin did, to take it one step up. Yes, talk to someone who may not know these issues, but take it one step further and get in touch with our policymakers. Write a letter, make a phone call, send a picture of a baby, tell a story about a baby or a family in your care. This is an election year. Reach out to the candidates. Our governor and every seat in the legislature is up for election. I know Hannah put in the chat, check out our website for our NJ Votes for Kids workbook around what you can do to advocate during the election. This year, we focused it on young children. Use it. Check out our website, our NJ Vote for Kids section on the website gives you all the contact information for those currently in office and those who are running for office. This is a time to reach out to them and tell them why this issue is important for you, your staff, your families, and your children. And join ACNJ, sign up for our action alerts. We'll give you information and engage you in advocacy as we look forward. We have their attention. We need to build on that. And I think that we have seen new exciting leadership develop here in New Jersey among women of color in our legislature who are picking up the charge and working on behalf of young children and families. We have new leaders nationally. This is the time to take advantage of that. So I'm going to echo what Caitlin said. Take action. You are the change. So thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for everyone who participated. Again, the webinar, the slides will be available to all of you, a recording of the webinar, and we'll have a session on Friday as well, where you can ask some questions of Caitlin. Thanks everyone, and have a great day.